which brings us to the public comment period. And I know that people have been waiting patiently. We appreciate your patience. It's a little bit earlier than we originally said, so that's good. So blue cards have been...
Actually green.
Oh, green.
Sorry.
It says blue here.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm supposed to collect green cards. And I only have 2 so far, but I see others are coming. That's fine. So we're planning on 3-minute presentations for each commenter, and depends how many we have. We might be able to relax that a little bit. Oh yes, but we do want to make time for comments from the web. So right now we'll stick with 3-minute comments, and we'll see. I don't know what order these came in. Does either Ravina or Kelly want to start? And why don't you say your full name and if you represent anyone in particular.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ravina Sewell. I'm the Executive Director of California Safe Schools. We're a children's environmental health and environmental justice coalition. And I just really want to thank you. You're phenomenal. Seriously, all of you, the expert panel, scientific panel, OEHHA, and to Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory, your presentations and your graciousness really in working and finding ways to help the community, the public, understand very complicated issues in a very, honestly, very gracious way that was easy to understand. So thank you for that. I just have a very quick comment. So I'm trying to understand this. So if in any way I've misrepresented or misconstrued anything, please feel free to correct me, okay? So if the objective of this study is to determine if there are health risks from the tire crumb, which comes from tires, a product that we all know is considered to be too toxic for landfills, then right now, and I fully support everything OEHHA and you are doing right now with studies, but we know that right now there are some significant credible studies that identify at least 30 hazardous chemicals, carcinogens, hormonal disruptors, and neurotoxin, as well as known chemicals that include but are not limited to carbon black, mercury, chromium, arsenic, cadmium, and lead. And we all know that there's no safe level for lead. So knowing that and fully supporting the work that OEHHA and the scientific panel are doing currently together to develop study protocols, is there any possibility that OEHHA, as they proceed ahead with investigating some of these sites, if they determine that these sites contain chemicals that are Prop 65, would OEHHA consider doing posting on them? That was a question I had. At least notice for the public so that they have a right to know. And then finally, just the other question I had was about data gap. And some of these were very much cleared up by the time the last presentation was done. But it doesn't appear that there was a long-term study is being considered, and biomonitoring of human subjects while doing the dermal that they just spoke about. I'm not sure if blood or urine would be appropriate, and I would hope perhaps if you think that is, that would be something you'd consider. And then it doesn't appear that the study right now has cumulative impacts or synergistic effects. And the risk assessment, in my understanding, which again, I could be incorrect, seems to lack stable, consistent products. So no field is the same, and so it seems like the data is incomplete. And so finally, in conclusion of my comments, in an era where cancer and asthma and neurological disorders and hormonal disruptions are occurring, especially in children, a need to recycle should just never be a priority over health and the safety of youth, of members of the public, or of athletes. So again, thank you so much for everything. I learned a great deal today and appreciated it. Thank you.
So Dr. Zeiss, do you want to comment about the issue of posting and any other issue in response to Ms. Sewell?
Yes, and I just want to express it, we really do understand the public's concern about this synthetic turf fields, and we're trying to study it in a very expeditious way, and you can see the level of resources that we've put into it, and we do realize that some studies have shown that chemicals listed under Prop 65 could potentially be present in these fields, and kids could be exposed to them. I want to turn, so Proposition 65 works off of significant risk, and I just want to, it becomes more a legal question. So I just want to turn to Carol Moynihan Cummings, our Chief Counsel at OEHHA, who can kind of go through and tell you a little bit more about how Proposition 65 works in this context.
Good afternoon. I knew I wouldn't make it all the way through the meeting without talking. That's why I'm here. It's okay. So just real quickly, as Lauren said, Prop 65 has some significant limitations in terms of how it could address this situation. One being that it is exposure-based, and so you have to know that there's an exposure to a listed chemical that's significant enough to require a warning. There's also exemptions under Prop 65 for government agencies, and so to the extent any of these fields are owned by a government or including local school districts, they're not required to give warnings under the law anyway. Also, our office wouldn't be the correct authority to require those warnings. Our work on Prop 65 is more scientific and regulatory. The enforcement of Prop 65 is done by the Attorney General's office, local prosecutors, and private individuals acting in the public interest. So having said all that, we certainly look at these issues, and the folks at the Attorney General's office have actually dealt with some of these issues in the past about crumb rubber and fields and stuff. So it's not something that we're ignoring, but it may not be the most appropriate way to address the issue.
I have one comment in response to part of your query with regard to biomonitoring of human specimens. That's something that's still being considered, if I may say. Task 5 we didn't really talk about today. Task 5 is personal monitoring, biomonitoring study protocol development. So there's still, staff are still working on what they're going to propose there. So I think we'll be dealing with this in the future. It hasn't been taken off the table. So, and you are?
Kelly Watts.
Okay, Kelly.
Hi. So my name is Kelly Watts. In addition to my work with journalists and the news media, I hear concerns from health professionals, citizen groups, and athletes across the country regarding this OEHHA study. And on their behalf, I have 4 questions representing their concerns. Some of them I'm going to just be reinforcing. So in no particular order, the question, why are transcripts of these meetings not being made available to the public? The posted videos are fine as they are, but as you probably know, they're clumsy and hard to navigate and impractical for scholarly or journalistic review. Millions of dollars have been allocated for this study, so the basic transcribing of the meeting should be easily affordable, and the posting of the transcripts would be a big help toward transparency and helping to inform interested parties. Number 2, why is the public not being notified, and by the public I mean the media, or being allowed to observe the sampling of the tire crumb or its testing? Advanced warning regarding the scheduling does not need to be far-reaching, and of course the field sampling would primarily take place in open fields where observers would not be a safety concern or a hindrance. Again, this goes toward transparency. Number 3, can reliable scientific conclusions really be made about the health risks which are meaningful and address the public's concerns when taking into account the unreliability of the existing and proposed sampling data, as well as the lack of safe harbor levels for many of the chemicals involved? These concerns are based in part on data points that have been discussed here, such as tire crumb's significant chemical variability, in which it contains toxic ingredients in inconsistent and unpredictable concentrations. And the last, and this is actually outside of the scope of Prop 65, could it be made to be within the scope and purview of this panel to discuss the utility of posting warning signs for the public at California tire crumb synthetic turf fields until such a time as exposure to tire crumb chemicals are reasonably shown to be safe? As we know, this and other studies continue to be dragged out. Children continue to accumulate chemical exposures from the fields. A common argument made for not giving parents warning with posting signs is to avoid a panic. On the other hand, and perhaps more along the lines of just doing the right thing, warning signs would enable mothers and fathers to be able to proactively make an informed choice for their children, especially for protecting medically vulnerable children. And I would once again like to thank you all for your participation and work. Thanks.
So I know you're busy, Patty. Were you able to multitask and hear Kelly's concerns? Would you like to, sort of make a summary?
Some of those that
Yeah.
remind me if I didn't capture all of them. Field that we go to in terms of having the time's up for me. Fields about letting the public to join us during field tests. It's not that we don't want them to be there. We're not on purpose trying to hide. There's the issue that some of the fields are privately owned, some of the fields are publicly owned. We do need to get permission and consent from the owner. And part of it in our initial field equipment, we do encounter a lot of trouble. Owner willing to join or not is the great determination of the success of this study. And we were having a hard time recruiting field. So based on that, a lot of owners does not want to be disclosed or want to know. So we choose a method to help us recruit in a field in the variety that we can cover for the benefit of the study. So maybe Carol can let us explain a little bit about the process that we are recruiting field and the choice.
I don't know that I could add very much to what you said, but it's true that it's difficult to recruit folks for these kinds of studies. As someone on the panel mentioned earlier, US EPA had some similar issues trying to recruit fields, and certainly bringing a bunch of extra folks along, or even an extra folk that's from the press along, is probably not going to encourage people to participate. I think there's a basic level of concern from the public that we might not be doing our job, but I don't think that that's true, and we are doing our best to make sure that the sampling is done correctly. As you heard today, there's been a lot of work done on making sure that our protocols are appropriate. So I don't know that adding observers would assist in that process. Did you want me to address a couple of the other issues that he brought up? Sure.
Even though the first few phases have not dealt with human subjects, protocols for studies with human subjects require confidentiality and privacy. And so we really cannot have, the press and everybody else there while we're conducting the studies. I mean, it really is one of the cornerstones of human subject protection.
Carol, did you have some other of Kelly's points to address? Because
Well, I think there were a couple of other ones, and I don't know that whether he's going to submit those in writing as well. We could always respond separately, but
he said yes.
okay, because we could certainly consider having the meetings transcribed. We do that with some of our other meetings. There's always a cost issue, but it's not a real high cost for transcription services, especially if it's after the fact, not real time during the meeting. I don't know. We could look into that. The issue about whether or not this panel has the authority to require warnings, I don't think so. This panel is an advisory group. It's a group of scientists that give advice to the program, and even the program doesn't have any authority under the existing law to require warnings for anything. So I think that would have to be handled differently through other existing laws or changes to the law.
Yeah, and I just also want to add with respect to the transcript, we do post videos of the meeting, and sometimes it can be difficult to work through a long meeting, and so we'll look at ways of making it easier to track the different segments of the meeting. So that's another thing that we'll consider.
I do think that making the transcripts available to the public in a feasible way is a good idea that I would endorse. Okay, I want to move on to Amy Bracken.
Hi, thank you. Amy Bracken with the Synthetic Turf Council. Actually, we wanted to recognize and appreciate and thank all of you for doing what you're doing. Industry is incredibly supportive of everything you're doing and the study design, everything else that you're putting into it. We've been as open as we possibly can be in sharing any information we have. And I'll hurry through my comments because I know you guys are trying to get out of here too. With respect to some of the questions that came up about age of the field and infill and when things are replaced and that kind of thing, we can certainly share that information. Typically a field at that 8 or 9 year mark is being replaced due to wear and tear. A lot of that happens with the fiber itself. As you said, they look a lot different and there's a need for replacement. They're not necessarily extracting infill and replacing infill and keeping the fiber the same. The entire system goes. So we can add information to that, Patty or Emily. I can follow up with that. And as an industry association, tell you what best practices are and that kind of thing to help with some of that. In addition to that, we talked about the sampling at the end and the field sampling. Initially, when we started, you were talking about sampling of fiber and of crumb rubber. By the end, when we talked about field sampling, a lot of that was just sampling of the crumb rubber. So my question is, are we taking any fiber samples, and what's being done with the fiber samples at age, early on and at 8, 9, 10 years? Is there anything being done there? And the last question I have is, in that sampling process, we talked about 902 fields, I think, in California, which is a very good representation of the overall market. Part of that, though, is that most of those fields have an infill sample that's not specifically crumb rubber. So many of those fields are a mixture of crumb rubber and sand or crumb rubber and other products. How are you handling that when we start looking at this sampling? Is there anything that's being done to identify those other products that are actually in those infill mixes? Thanks.
Thank you, Amy. Patty, do you want to address those comments?
I have 51 seconds. First of all, fiber sample. When we go to the field, we promise to the owner we are not going to cause any damage to the field. But when we scoop up the crumb rubber, we are not on purpose only getting the crumb rubber. We do see fiber, we do see dirt. We are collecting as a whole unit of whatever we can scoop up, but not cutting the fiber. So with that, we do collect the fiber not individually, but as a unit for the exposure. And we do have field that has sand in it. Before we go in, we interview the owner, who is the installer, where you get the material from what is in the infill. So we are not collecting sample that is mixing with other rubber. We focus on crumb rubber or crumb rubber with sand. That's the bottom line. We are not trying to introduce another alternative into our study, but sand is something, even though they don't mix it, you're going to get dirt from the environment. But a lot of you do have a sand mix in order to provide the support. So in order to get the field, get the enough sample, we are collecting, but we are not separating sand because it's part of the exposure. We have a lot of discussion with the lab, and definitely Dr. Magdalena can give you some insight. Is an exposure unit when you go to the field. Chemical can transfer from the rubber to the sand. So there's no reason to separate the sand from the perspective of exposure. And we also discussed with the US EPA, the federal agency, they are having the same concept behind and belief. Is exposure unit, we are looking for potential transfer chemical between each other. We look at it as a unit. Any?
Thank you, Patty.
Sorry, one more. The 905 field in the database, they are all crumb rubber field. We on purpose to select only crumb rubber or crumb rubber and sand, not any alternative or alternative mix.
Thank you. Nick Lapis, am I saying your name right?
Hi, good afternoon. Nick Lapis with the environmental group Californians Against Waste. First of all, thank you for the very thoughtful approach you're taking to the study. We've supported it from day one. We've supported the funding of the study. We're going to need this information. I had a quick comment, just maybe a possible suggestion on the earlier conversation you had about stratification. At least on ozone, it seems like you guys are breaking everything up in below the 50th percentile or above the 50th percentile. So 49%, 51, 49 is considered low, 51 is considered high. And since you don't have that many data points, you might be better to use the actual numbers, and then you can look for trends as opposed to just using the high and low. Just a minor suggestion. It seems like the biggest flaw or potential flaw of this whole study is something that you guys have gone back to over and over, which is background levels of these various contaminants. And that's sort of the one thing that no matter what your results are, can sort of discredit the whole work, right? Because it depends on the individual field, but you think of the field in Berkeley off of Highway 80, well, there's a synthetic turf field right next to Highway 80, right? And you could be growing organic wheatgrass there, but I bet if you were to test it, there would be a lot of road dust and other things that would impact that those results. And so I think you really have to put a lot more thought into what you're going to do for background testing of the background soils, not to mention the air. Otherwise, it'd be a lot of money spent on something that could be easily dismissed. Thank you. Unless there are questions.
Thank you. We have a number of comments from that have been emailed to us. And who's the lucky reader? Jocelyn? And Rebecca?
Testing. Oh, this one works. Okay, I'll go ahead and read the first question. This one comes from Mary Cordaro. Number one, what are the main sources and percentages of types of rubber used for tracks and playgrounds? Virgin synthetic rubber and recycled rubber from tires. Number two, are you analyzing both crumb rubber and continuous solid rubber surfaces? Number three, what are the other types of alternative surfaces that will be analyzed? Number four, will asbestos be included in the testing? Number 5, can we get a list of the lower detection testing limits for the substances tested? 6, what will be the testing sensitivity, ppb, ppt? 7, can we get a comprehensive list of the VOCs and SVOCs found? Will organophosphates be included? Number 8, will you be testing the dust that comes off existing rubber crumb tracks for finer particles and substances to see what gets into the air in addition to testing the bulk material? Number 9, how many types of PAHs will you be testing for? There are 3 more questions. Would you like to go one by one and I'll continue after?
Well, you know what I'm wondering? It seems like there's a lot of questions that we could answer via mail. And I'm wondering if we could take in these comments and questions, just in the interest of time. We could distribute the series that we received to the panel, and we could also separately respond to questions. Shall we go ahead with that? I realize we're a little bit limited in time. If there's a general comment for the panel to hear, I think that would be good at this time, but it probably would take us quite a while to work through the whole stack of comments.
Yeah, that sounds like a good solution to respond in writing to certainly that series of questions from, was that Terry O'Sullivan? Yeah. Terry, those are good questions, but yeah, I don't think we have time to go through each one of those right now. But they'll be distributed to the panel, and the panel will have a chance to look at them, and then staff will be responding.
We have one question here. I try to summarize it. In characterizing
Could you say who's it from?
Sorry. Patricia Taylor. And in the chemical analysis, not only characterize the product, how about the synergism between the chemical, and especially some chemicals that are harmful in low dose?
Well, just a general comment is this is a key problem in environmental health altogether is chemical mixtures and interactions among the chemicals in that mixture. It's certainly a real issue. It's not easily addressed toxicologically at this point. I don't know if any of the panel members have any general comments about this, but it was that Patricia has a good point. I know. Debbie, do you want to say anything? Patty, are there any sort of overarching comments that?
This one talk about goalkeeper, the exposure should be a lot higher than other people in the field, and how we're going to validate the method.
Yeah, again, that's the kind of question I think we can answer in writing. I think some of the materials that you distributed to the panel in advance of the meeting suggest that goalkeepers actually don't have more exposure than other position players. My son was a goalkeeper for a long time, so I hope that's the case.
Let's talk about the crumbable in the infield act as a sink for chemical collection and from exposure to air and water. Comment.
Yeah, again, I think, perhaps, we are concerned about exposures related to the water on the field and the air above the field.
The multimedia assessment with the fugacity model will explicitly cover that.
Right. Also, I believe that we were going to be, I think that there's going to be some kind of background sample. There will be the tire crumb sample, and then there will be the environmental samples, and there will be some work to relate the three so that we can understand what kind of sinks they are, both that material and just what's background.
Most of the questions are very technical, like how you sample, what you sample. So I think it's better to share with the panel and also our scientists in email.
Thank you.
One quick question. Are these shared with, I mean, just the panel, or are they public record?
We could also post these.
That's good suggestion.
Yeah.
So I think maybe we'll end the public comment period here. I think sharing information, as was just suggested, is a good way to go. We want to be as transparent as possible. We're not trying to hide anything here.